Why do so many marriages fail? Why do so many marriages fail? We have normalized this catastrophe of marriages failing, but I'm here to tell you that your marriage can succeed. The question, why do so many marriages fail, can absolutely be answered. And in this video, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to share with you 6 reasons why 50 to 60% of marriages fail in at least our country. Now, in the world of sports, where I spend a lot of time working with clients, or where I spent 14 years working inside of an NFL football team, I was grateful for the opportunity to serve that organization and to help couples and coaches, many of them, keep their marriages, stay out of divorce court. And to this day, most of my client list includes people in the world of sports and business, but mostly in the world of sports. So I brought some really cool things to show you. I don't know if you can see those. These are our 2 Super Bowl rings that I was privileged to earn as part of the Baltimore Ravens championship football teams. So I served for a lot of years. We won 2 championships. We'll put those away. We won't need those for our discussion. But I want to talk about in this workshop the 6 reasons that so many marriages fail. I said 50 to 60% because that's true in the broader society, but in the world of sports, that percentage can be higher, sometimes 60, 70, 80%, depending on the sports league. If you're watching this video and you're in this workshop, you want to know how to make your marriage succeed. And I'm going to tell you the 6 reasons why so many marriages fail. You can take that and learn and be prepared to win in your relationship life, your married life. All right, let's jump right into these 6 reasons. The first one that I would share with you is what I call unnamed and unframed expectations. We all have expectations. No one gets into an intimate relationship, especially marriage, without expectations. You have expectations. I have expectations. All God's children have expectations. And my Lord, if you are married, you absolutely have expectations. We are built and wired to have expectations. And so we got these expectations, but many people can't name or clearly express them or identify what their exact expectations are. It's like they can tell you, people have these lists, by the way, when they get married. Well, when I get married, I want a woman who's like this. I want a woman who's like that. I want a woman who's like this. And ladies will say, I want a man who's like this or that, who's 6 feet 7 inches tall and makes $5 million a year. And all those things are cool. Some people like, I don't really have any expectations, to which I would argue that's not true. We all have expectations. We were built and wired to have expectations. That's why there's such a thing as hope. Hope is simply an expectation, a positive expectation of the future. God made us to have expectations, and life makes us have expectations as well. So let's talk a little bit about these expectations. Most people, like I said, they know what they want, but they often don't know how to say why they want what they want. So if you ask somebody, why do you want a husband who makes $5 million a year or $300,000 a year, or you name the number, whatever it is, why do you want that? Well, I want financial security. Well, why do you want that? Well, because I want financial security. Well, why do you want that? Because I want financial security. Why do you want a man who is or a woman who is 5'3" and 130 pounds, and you give all of the descriptives? Why do you want that? Well, because that's what I like. Well, okay, fine. That's what you like. But what if the 5'3" lady puts on 30 pounds when she's having your baby and she changes? What does that do to you? Are you tracking with me? So we have these unnamed and unframed expectations. When I say unnamed expectations, sometimes we don't even give them a name. We just carry them. We have them in the back of our minds. Expectations that we haven't announced, that we've never said, but we carry them. And by the way, the higher your expectations and the lower they are delivered upon, did I say that right? The lower people deliver on your expectations, the greater is our disappointment. And this is a huge issue in our marriages because we got these expectations and people can't always deliver. So we end up with disappointments, and oftentimes we're disappointed and we don't know why. Nothing wrong with having expectations, but it's important that we learn to name them, and it's important that we learn how to frame them. What do you mean by framing them? Framing is the ability to articulate at a core level why you long for certain things, certain experiences, certain outcomes in your marriage relationship. At a core level, why is this a longing for you? That's all an expectation is. It is a longing. And when your spouse is not meeting your expectations, that means longings go left alone. So you see how this picture goes. So I was working with a couple a few years ago. He won a Super Bowl, made a lot of money, played a lot of years in the NFL. But he had an expectation of his wife that she would respect him, that she would listen to his voice. She would, care about him. Really, that's what he was asking for. That's what he wanted. Because he grew up in an abusive home. He grew up with a mother who neglected him. He grew up with a mother who sometimes showed she loved him, and then at other times she, talked about him very badly in a very demeaning way. So he had an expectation, a longing, a desire for his wife to be different from his mother. Fair, reasonable, at least understandable expectation. Well, he never named the expectation. And he poorly framed the expectation. So in my work with them, it was to help them understand where these expectations came from. When the expectations are named and framed, it gives you the opportunity in your relationship to connect around those and literally to build a bulwark for your marriage to be strong. Because these expectations and longings lead to what we're going to talk about next, which are some very important emotional needs. And so here is the second reason why so many marriages don't make it. Most people are unfamiliar with, let me say it this way. Most people are familiar with physical needs: sex, food, money, housing, those things. Cars, that's a need in most places, right? You got to have transportation. We're familiar with those needs. Did I say food? Yeah, those are reasonable, understandable needs. Most people are unfamiliar with emotional need. Yeah, we live our lives, especially in American society, ignoring emotional need. When you get married to someone, you have emotional needs. You didn't know that maybe. Maybe your spouse doesn't know that. And this explains a lot. You don't know that you have emotional needs. You've never articulated them. You don't even know what it would sound like. You don't even know what to call them. You didn't even know they existed. And perhaps you have no idea that your wife or your spouse also has emotional needs, And maybe your spouse doesn't articulate them, and maybe there's never been any conversation. So we talk about needs such as financial security, respect. I don't want any drama. We see that as a need, right? I want to feel safe. I want to feel loved. I want there to be friendship in our relationship, but we don't necessarily give clarity as to what that has to do with what's going on inside of me. How do we articulate that at an emotional level? Let me just say this to you. When you can articulate your needs, now you notice I'm saying both singular need and plural needs because both are real. But when you can articulate them in your marriage, all of a sudden you've taken your connection to a whole different level. When you begin to care for them in your marriage, you've really gone to a new level. People who ignore or are ignorant of emotional need have a difficult time connecting because God made us, can I just help you? He made us not only to be physical beings and spiritual beings and volitional beings who make decisions, he also made us to be emotional beings. So we are physical, we are spiritual, we are volitional, we are emotional. I feel like I'm leaving one out, but we'll come to that another time. When we leave out this very important part of how we were made, all of a sudden, and maybe not suddenly, but gradually perhaps, there's an erosion because of disappointment, because you feel like your needs aren't being met, and resentment sets in. And I said, now we have a lot of we have lots of emotions, but there are only really maybe 6 core emotions. We got lots of these emotions, but when they go uncared for is when we enter crises in our marriages. And what ends so many marriages is when those emotional needs are ignored, belittled, or even dismissed. Now, I said that there are plural needs and there is a singular need. That singular need has to do with a very core need that you have and that your spouse or your partner has. And that core need has to be discovered. In my coaching work with couples, I help couples discover their core dominant emotional need. If you ever discover what that is, and it's a beautiful process that we go through, it's an exercise and homework involved. But when you discover that very core emotional need, something comes alive in you. And if you can begin to interact together as a couple around your unique emotional needs, something comes alive in your marriage. I feel like somebody is resonating with you. Is this resonating with you? Like you having a eureka moment like, oh my goodness, this is what I did not know that I needed to know. This is where I've been missing it, or this is where your spouse has been missing it. This lack of familiarity with emotional needs is really, really hurting a lot of marriage. But when you discover how to handle, understand, care for emotional needs in your marriage relationship, the sky becomes the limit. I was talking with a lady tonight at a party. She was married for 31 years and she left her husband. She said he just drank too much. He drank a lot. He was a police officer and he drank a lot. And she said, after 31 years, I just could not do it anymore. She says, I've dated other people, but it's not. She says, and I really can't tell anybody that the truth is I still love him. I said, oh, you still feel emotionally attached to him? She said, absolutely. I said, but you felt like your emotional needs were being ignored, didn't you? She goes, how did you know that? Well, I'm not a genius, but I do know this. We are all made to have emotional needs. And so we want to learn to get familiar with them. How about this? Unresolved conflict that stacks. Couples fail because conflict is real, and often conflict is left unresolved. And what doesn't resolve revolves, and then it devolves. That means it only gets worse. And so these conflicts begin to stack up. And when conflicts stack up in your marriage, it is, oh my goodness, draining. It's overwhelming because they just keep coming up time and 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 time again. Unresolved conflict is exhausting. Part of what happens when conflict is unresolved is you're almost always waiting for the next time. So it's like you never resolve it, so you never fully leave it alone. So it's always humming in the background, even if you're not talking about it. And then at some point, you know it's going to come back up, and that gets to be exhausting. It's what I call stacking our conflicts. And when conflict happens, we generally have two ways that we respond, not always just these two ways, but generally two ways. We either avoid it or we attack when it's happening. We avoid it or we attack, and neither of those is necessarily ideal. When you're having conflicts, one of the helpful ways to resolve it is sometimes to just say, I need a break. I need a break. But for most couples, that's never enough. You need skills. You need to learn how to resolve conflict, because most of us were not taught how to resolve conflict. So when I'm working with clients, either private clients or in groups, one of the things that we work through is how to diagram conflict in your marriage, in your relationship, so that you can see it every time it happens. Imagine being able to see it every time it's happening, the way you operate in it, and then how you need to move in order to resolve the conflict. Conflict is not rocket science. Not knowing how to resolve conflict can make it feel like rocket science. But when you learn to resolve conflicts, you can have an amazing, amazing experience in your marriage relationship. It doesn't have to feel unsafe. It doesn't have to feel unnerving. It doesn't have to feel overwhelming having conflict, because you learn to actually resolve it. The reason so many couples don't make it is because they never resolve conflict. I mean, for years. No, literally years. I was working with a couple, and there was infidelity in year one. They didn't unveil the infidelity until year 25. They had a 25-year-long conflict that was left unresolved. And no wonder they couldn't get along. No wonder they never felt close. They loved each other. They had children, they had a beautiful home. They had a wonderful career, very successful people, but they never felt close to one another. And they were actually both unfaithful to each other in different ways. And that never got resolved. Here's what I want you to understand. You can resolve conflicts and do it well and have an amazing, joyful, connected, vibrant, thriving marriage. You can do this. It's possible. I know, because I've taught couples how to do it, and they're winning, and they're experiencing the relief and the joy of knowing how to resolve conflict. So unresolved conflict is one of those reasons that so many couples don't make it. How about this one? Closely related to unresolved conflict is unrecovered trust. Trust is the bedrock, the foundation. It's what I call the concrete of the marriage relationship. When trust is broken, trust must be rebuilt. Trust must be recovered. If you don't recover the trust, it's hard for your marriage to make it. Because if there's no trust, nobody feels safe. If you can't trust your spouse, or your spouse can't trust you, they will only live with, how would I say this thread in the background of resentment, of distance. Have you ever seen couples who live together and they are, they're cordial, they're nice, they're good people, they're successful people. They just have no connection. They're kind of cold toward each other. They just kind of are existing. This thing called civil divorce is happening all over the world because people are getting tired of just existing. And one of the reasons people just exist in their marriages, they coexist, is because trust has been broken at some point, perhaps through infidelity. Maybe that's your story. Maybe it's through some other thing that was done that broke your trust. Maybe your spouse told you a lie. Maybe they spent money that you didn't agree on, but it broke your trust. Trust can be broken at micro levels, but those micro levels can create macro fissures in your connection, in your relationship. Why is trust so important? Trust is important because it says to you and to your spouse, I can depend on my spouse. I can count on them to be there for me. I know that I'm important to my spouse. I know that I can turn my back and know that my spouse will have my back and will prioritize this relationship as the first and most important human relationship in all of their life. And I do the same. That's what trust does. When trust is lost, it's lost in buckets, and it's only regained in drips, which means it can only be regained very intentionally, one step at a time, usually slowly over long periods of time. Isn't it amazing? You can lose your spouse's trust or vice versa, and it can happen in a moment just like that. 2 minutes and the trust is decimated, and it will take you 2 years to recover it. It's lost in buckets, but it's regained in drips. And couples who don't work to regain trust usually are not going to make it. I hate to say that. I don't want to be a pessimist. I don't want to be that negative guy. I'm just simply telling you the reality of why 50, 60, sometimes 70, 80% of couples don't make it, because they say, I'm sorry. They say, will you forgive me? I forgive you. Can we move on? Yes, we can move on. Let's just forget about it and let's, keep moving. That's not how you rebuild trust. Rebuilding trust is a very fine art. It's a very detailed process. It's a very intentional process, but it's not, well, let's just move on. Let's just forget about it. I'm good if you're good. Because we're human, we need trust at a high level, and we have to be intentional about rebuilding. And I teach so many people, especially when there's been infidelity. I love working with couples who want to recover from infidelity, because at the core of my work with them is teaching them how to rebuild trust. And I've seen couples win. I've seen them rebuild trust. But if they don't work intentionally to rebuild that trust, the marriage will always be vulnerable to fear and to resentment and to regret. And so recovering trust so that there's not suspicion hanging around your marriage. Do you feel suspicious towards your spouse? Do you feel like you can't trust him or her? My prayer for you is that you will lean in and you will give attention to building, rebuilding, renewing, reviving trust in your relationship. And you can do it. I'm telling you this. All right. So here is the fifth reason: unproductive communication. So often, probably most often, when couples reach out to me and say, hey, we're looking for a marriage coach, Usually they say, are you a marriage therapist? You're a marriage counselor. I remind people I'm not a marriage therapist. I'm not a marriage counselor. I am a coach of all things. I coach people. I put the tools and the skills and the resources in your hands so that you can do some very specific work. And if you do it, if you follow the coaching, if you are coachable, you're going to get great results. Well, and they come to me, they say, well, we have communication issues. That's a famous phrase. We have communication issues. And I know what they mean. What they're saying is we're communicating all the time because we communicate all the time. What they're really saying, though, is that their communication is unproductive. It's not productive. We talk, but we argue. We stop saying anything to each other. By the way, that's communication also. Like when you're silent in the house, that's communication on some other levels, right? You're saying, I don't want to be near you. You're saying, I'm afraid. I don't know how to resolve this. You're saying, I'm angry. You're saying so many things. You're saying, I don't like you. You're saying, what are you saying when you're silent? Yeah, you're communicating. But that's unproductive communication, because unproductive communication pushes you apart from one another. It separates you. It creates distance between the two of you. That's what unproductive communication does. Just imagine two people talking who just can't understand each other, like they're speaking different languages. They're on the street, and eventually you just get frustrating. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't speak Russian, or I don't speak French, or I don't speak Spanish. I don't parlez-vous français? I don't speak English. Whatever the language barrier is, eventually people separate. That's how God did it at the Tower of Babel, by the way. He confused the languages and the nations were divided. Well, that's what happens in our marriages. We separate because we're not communicating in a productive way on the same wavelength. So you feel unheard, perhaps. You feel unseen. You feel unvalued. You feel diminished. You feel dismissed. You feel treated like you're not valuable. It's like, we got this thing, like if people don't speak your language, you think, what's wrong with you? That's a thing in America, like if you don't speak English. But the point is, it drives us apart and it makes people feel little. It makes people feel unvalued. And so it's important that we learn to have productive conversation. Productive conversation changes the entire environment because people begin to feel like their voice matters. They begin to feel important to the other person. They begin to feel like the things they're expressing are not dismissed or demeaned or diminished, but they're actually embraced and considered and respected. When those things happening, you've got productive communication. Couples who can communicate and connect, that's the key. Because communication is not just words. It's not just the things we say out of our mouths. There's so much more that goes into it. In fact, studies have shown that 80% of all communication is nonverbal. So even if you don't say anything, as I said earlier, you're saying something. And so productive communication makes us do like this. It makes us connect emotionally. It causes us to feel close to one another. We feel cherished and valued and respected and honored, all because of productive communication. And so my desire is to help couples learn to communicate, not just in a way that the words are said the right way, we'll say it this way and repeat it back to me, but in such a way that emotionally you become intimate and close to one another because you are communicating in such a way that you can't be otherwise. All right. So unproductive communication is one of the big reasons why so many marriages end. Again, whether it's in the sports world, whether it's in business, whether you're in arts and entertainment or medicine, No matter what, if you can't communicate, you cannot have a sustained connection with one another. And eventually, divorce court starts calling your name. And I don't want that for any of you. For any of you. I was working with a doctor, a couple who were physicians, and they called me and said, we're having struggles in our marriage. And what I noticed as I began working with them is that neither of them would actually be honest with each other. They dance around things. They would flat out lie sometimes. Can I just tell you, you can't get close and communicate well when you're not honest. I had another client couple I was working with, and they were struggling with some infidelity. And we spent a year and a half, almost 2 years, working, trying to help them resolve pain in their marriage and recover from infidelity. And we just could not make traction. Here's why. We discovered that one of them had been lying for the whole time about having been unfaithful. And here's all I'm saying. Remember we talked about trust? We talked about communication that brings you closer. Honest communication, even when it is hard, as long as it is caring and loving, can bring you closer together. But untruthful, dishonest communication will never, ever keep your marriage together. All right, last reason, unhealed relationship wounds. When Sherry and I got married, in fact, before we got married, we got engaged. Several of the conversations that we had were about woundings that happened to us before we came together, before we fell in love, before we got married 3.5 years later. We had wounds. We had things that hurt us. I like to tell people that one of the worst things that happened to me was the best thing that happened to me. My father abandoned me when I was just 9 months old, and I never met him, never laid eyes on him, couldn't tell you what he looked like, was never financially supported by him. But I met him just before Sherry and I got married. And I realized that that was a gaping wound in my life. And I had to talk to her about that. And she had her own story of abandonment. And she had these wounds in her life that we knew were going to be a part of our marriage relationship. And I bet that some of you who are watching this and who are part of this workshop, you have wounds, you have painful things that have happened to you before you got married, before you fell in love with each other. But you probably have some that also have happened in your relationship since you got married. Things like one or the other not showing up for you in very important times, especially in a time of crisis. Maybe one of you worked so much, but you couldn't show up when your spouse was in a medical crisis, or maybe you didn't show up when the baby was being born. Maybe you did something that hurt your spouse. Maybe there was infidelity. All of those are relationship wounds, and we all have them. I don't think anyone gets through life without having them. It's just par for the course, sometimes more severe than others. I say, Rod, why are you talking about all of these relationship wounds? I'm talking about them because so many couples end their marriages because they are unhealed. Those wounds, those painful things that have happened to them aren't healed. But what we've learned is that couples can actually help each other heal. How about that idea? You can actually help each other heal literally from trauma. You can help your spouse recover from traumatic things that have happened in their lives. But when those wounds are left unhealed, untreated, uncared for, whether they happened before you came together or they happened within your marriage relationship, if they're left unhealed, unconsidered, untreated, if you will, I say treated lightly, but if they're uncared for and unhealed, they can last and they can bring division between the two of you, because you'll be, how would I say this? You'll live unaware that these painful things are consuming your spouse, your partner, and playing a significant role in how they function from day to day, and in your relationship, in your marriage, how they get through life, what do we call these coping strategies that they have developed, and you think they're just bad habits. It's kind of like the lady who said, I mentioned earlier, her husband drank a lot. She didn't realize that he drank a lot, probably because of some trauma she mentioned in our conversation. But that trauma, she said, he's definitely not going to any kind of therapy. So he had a lot of trauma that was unhealed, and that was a big source of their breakup. I have not coached a couple at all who has not had something traumatic happen in their lives along the way that they need healing from. And when a spouse understands that, now we're cooking with hot grease, like we used to say in the South, right? We're cooking, things can move forward, the marriage can begin to thrive. But if those wounds are left unhealed, then it becomes difficult for the couple to find energy together, to find closeness, to find connection. They can love each other. In fact, sometimes couples come together around their trauma, but coming together around trauma is not the same as coming together and being healed from your trauma. And so it's important that couples heal from the things that happen to them. And when they do, they begin to thrive. They begin to connect. They begin to feel more whole. They begin to feel that they can make a powerful contribution to the marriage relationship. Both of them bring something unique to the table, and both of them benefit from their unique gifts and abilities and ways of seeing the world, and then they thrive. I don't know which part of this workshop resonates with you most, if it is these unhealed things, if it's the unresolved conflict, if it is the unproductive communication, but you don't have to live this way. In fact, nobody taught you this stuff. Nobody taught me this stuff. I had to go and learn this stuff, not only in graduate school, but literally 300 hours of research. I did the math. 300 hours of research trying to figure out what is it that couples need in order to succeed in their marriages. I can tell you, I obsess about this stuff. I love it because when you grow up and you watch marriages fall to pieces around you. Sherry was a child of divorce. I was a child of divorce. I watched couples all around me divorce, in my own family, never staying together, never getting married, or rather keeping a marriage together. And it's painful, it's brutal, it's rough on the kids. Can they survive eventually? Yes, but do they have to go through this? And you don't have to go through it. You don't have to throw away this precious gift of marriage that God has given you. And is it easy? No, it's not easy. We all know that. But is it worth it? Yeah, I think it's worth it. Love is worth it. You got something that's worth fighting for, but nobody taught you how to do it. Like nobody taught us in school how to actually communicate in a relationship. Nobody taught us in school about how to name and frame our expectations. Like they don't teach us relationship skills in school. They don't realize, like, people keep running to get married even though the divorce rates are high, because it's a part of human desire. Why don't they teach us this stuff? You don't have to keep living not knowing the keys, the secrets. And in 6 weeks, this is what happens with many of the couples I work with. You can learn these things and take your relationship life to other worldly levels. I was working with a couple, 2 physicians. They said, you gave us language that we didn't even know existed. We didn't know how to access it. And now we've never felt closer than having taken this course. Got a couple who are NFL couple. They reached out to me. They said, we're struggling and we just don't know what to do. We've been to counseling for years and it's not working. And they reached out to me and I provided for them this 6-part framework that addresses each one of these challenges, each one of these reasons why couples fail. And I did an interview with them. They said, we've never got to the root of things, of pain in our lives faster than with this Dream Marriage Masterclass. It's a program that I built just for couples who want to do the very specific work of learning how to name and frame their expectations, learning how to communicate and connect, learning how to renew trust in their relationship, learning, becoming familiar with emotions and learning what it means to be a part of each other's healing journey. Listen, the Dream Marriage Masterclass is a game changer. It is a game changer. Each of these couples were on the verge of divorce. They were talking about divorce court. And I asked them, like I asked so many couples, like, how much is this going to cost you to get a divorce? They were like, a lot. It's really a lot when you're wealthy, as these couples are. Very successful physicians, very successful NFL player and his spouse. They said, it's going to cost us a lot. They were like, but the pain is too much. I can't stay in this way. I would rather go through the divorce and they can have the money. I don't want the money. One couple I was working with, divorced, they had just purchased a $2 million house, which was the third house that they owned. And now all of those assets were split because they didn't do this work that we're talking about today. How much would you expect something like this to cost you? $10,000? $7,500? $5,000? If it costs that much, it would be worth it to your marriage, wouldn't it? Think about that. If it costs $10,000 to save your marriage, you knew the solution would work, you'd probably really consider that. If it costs $7,500, you probably really consider that. Like, how much did you spend for your car? How much did you spend for clothes? We spend money on so many things that don't have value, that cannot save this most cherished, important relationship, this thing that can change generations for ourselves and for our children. And so I want to encourage you to think about investing in you. See, you got to learn to stop thinking about the price of things and think about the value of things. You got to learn to stop thinking about price and start thinking about cost. So a course might cost you, this program might cost you, I don't know, maybe let's say it costs $5,000. What would be the real value if your marriage could be saved? So I want to make you an offer. I want to make you an offer to enroll in the Dream Marriage Masterclass. It is a program that's you're going to leave knowing how to communicate and connect. You're going to leave the program like these other couples I described, actually feeling the healing happening between the two of you. You're going to feel trust starting to grow. Imagine as trust is growing in your relationship, how much safer you're going to feel. Imagine knowing how, what it's going to feel like when you know how to resolve conflicts and you don't have to escalate and you don't have to leave the room or leave the house, but you can sit there and calmly, productively communicate, get closer, and resolve conflict. Imagine knowing how to touch the one button in each other's lives that makes each other so happy that you never imagined. Imagine that. That's what happens to couples who do the work in the Dream Marriage Masterclass. And guess what? It's not $10,000. It's not $5,000. It's not $7,500. It's not even $3,000. It's not $3,500. It's $1,997. $2,000 with a payment plan to save your marriage. Would that be worth it? If you could learn all of these things in one package and get access to a powerful coaching community and get access to some private sessions along with it, if you could get that for $2,000 and save your marriage and be happy and find joy and connection and intimacy and renew your love with one another, what, are you kidding me? Come on. Come on. Hey, I want to invite you to enroll in the Dream Marriage Masterclass. It's going to change the game in your life. The information you need is right there in the notes. Just click on the button and enroll and start changing your marriage. Win at marriage. Invest the time, invest the energy, and I'm telling you, in literally 6 weeks, you could see a powerful turnaround in your relationship. And there is a money back guarantee. If you do the work, if you invest the time, like, don't play. If you're not going to do the work, if you're not going to invest the time, do not play. You might as well leave this session right now. But if you're serious about your marriage and you do the work, you invest the time, you're going to get the results. If you don't get the results, we got some powerful, powerful things that we're going to do just for you, because we want to make sure that you get the results that your marriage deserves. So, hey, go ahead and click that button, get yourself enrolled in the Dream Marriage Masterclass, and watch your marriage relationship begin to go to otherworldly heights of connection, understanding, joy, laughter, and connection, and rebuilding trust. It is absolutely possible. And that's what my desire is for you. I'm so glad we had some time like this together. I believe you're encouraged and inspired. And what better time to make a decision to do something that will help your marriage than when you have begun to see what is possible. All right. Hey, I'll see you in another workshop or course. I hope to see you in the Dream Marriage Masterclass of all things. We'll see you soon.